Kyle here from All Media Reviews. I did the review a few days ago, or like a week ago, on that SJS album that I'm loving so much, and I'm waiting on the CDs. And I'm gonna do a collection, vinyl / collection update. Hopefully, when I get those, and maybe one or two others. I mean, 'cause I could do one, and I've been dealing with some stuff, unfortunately, recently with mice now in my house. Peppermint oil. Dryer sheets of peppermint oil are my two biggest, and having cats, of course. Anyway, so I'm kind of dealing with a lot, and I've got a game plan, and I've made some progress on my CDs. I think the CD A to Z, while it's not happening yet, the light is finally being seen at the end of the tunnel. So I've got all of them consolidated by letter, just they're not all in the racks, and anyway, they're all in bags and stuff, so. But, just getting at the SJS thing, how much I love that album, and loving that album. And, I mean, I don't know where it's going to finish my end of the year albums of the year list, but I think it's going to be pretty high. It could be my album of the year. That's just more where to put it. So I just thought, there's a big Pink Floyd influence, and I've always loved a lot of bands that are influenced by Pink Floyd. Not all bands, but... So I did a pub meeple on all the bands I can think of that I think of their influence from Pink Floyd, or directly or indirectly, even in a few cases. And so I ended up with, it was like 43. And then certain bands that won't be on the list, like the Flaming Lips, Arian, Radiohead, of course, RPWL, Airbag, Tame Impala, MGMT, The Pineapple Thief, Riverside, Mostly Autumn. I like one Riverside album, but it's not that much of a fan. Mostly Autumn, The Orb, Gong, Camel, and The Secret Machines. None of those made the list, so okay, but I had 43, so I'll start going up the list. I'm going to start showing copies. It's really just, I'll do a top 25. I'm just going to read off 26 through 43 that aren't really that differentiated. There's the Mars Volta. They could have gone on the list. When they were at the drive-in, they did a cover or two of some Pink Floyd stuff. It could be the early Pink Floyd, the Syd Barrett Floyd, of course. Woven, very unknown band. Coheed and Cambria, they definitely have a Pink Floyd influence. The Dukes of Stratosphere, big, both Beatles, psychedelic Beatles, and Syd Barrett Floyd, they've always reminded me of. Bjorn Reese, the guitarist from Airbag, who I've liked his music. I haven't really gotten that into Airbag. The Besnard Lakes, they were super trippy live. I can definitely hear that. Nectar, People for Audio, who I always compared when I first heard Besnard Lakes. It's a Canadian band that I will talk about at some point again. They only have 2 records. One record I have a CD from, Canadian independent band. And we're featured on the Ben Sinister Around the Bend documentary many years ago on their documenting through their trials and tribulations and tour struggles. A lot of Canadian bands, but Nectar. Let's see here. Dream Theater, of course, they covered Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, I love them. Their Pink Floyd influence isn't their biggest influence, but they have their Pink Floyd influence for sure. They've done Pink Floyd covers. Led Zeppelin, just No Quarter Alone. The band 3, they covered See Emily Play. Soft Machine, definitely a Syd Barrett era. Black Mountain, definitely with the sort of psychedelic, trippy, and heavy riffs and kind of, astral folk, blues rock. Kunik band, who later changed their name to Other Lives, but the first Kunik album, Lil Flight of the Finns, definitely has a Pink Floyd element to it. As one other band I'm going to be talking about from Oklahoma, Kunik. The Claypool Lennon Delirium, Les Claypool and Sean Lennon, definitely a psychedelic kind of, although they're goofy at times, but not too goofy, but the psychedelic part definitely is in there. Robin Hitchcock, people think he's like the sort of heir apparent to Syd Barrett in some ways. He really kind of took the mantle of Syd Barrett's style. Ozric Tentacles, very space rocky, of course. I don't have Hawkwind on this list, but, I could have had them. I didn't think about it. And then King Gizzard and the Lizardwood. So that's the bands that ended up outside the top 25. So starting with the top 25. Number 25, I have King Crimson. This album, maybe, I think of, among others, has the early Crimson, you can hear the influence from Pink Floyd, and definitely the sort of psychedelic in the production, and, Wake Up to Sidon isn't my favorite King Crimson album, but I think if I think of the King Crimson stuff that I hear Pink Floyd the most in, this might be it. One of them, for sure. Anyway, they're number 25. Number 24... again, this was hard to rate because I was trying to rate it on Pink Floyd influence as opposed to how much I like them. So some of the preferential band artists took weight when I was doing the voting on Pub Meeple. But Never Ending White Lights, number 24. While there's a lot of other influences, a lot of alternative rock, I can hear a lot of bands like U2 who are influenced by Pink Floyd, and Peter Gabriel. This album on Act 2, there's a song called The Warning, which I always think of David Gilmour. The guitar part sounds like David Gilmour. Never Ending White Lights is the brainchild of Daniel Victor. I've talked about them. He writes all the music, but he has other singers. He had all these different voices. A little bit like the kind of Arion thing, and it is conceptual, but it's not cheesy anyway. So I wouldn't even question. I mean, David Bowie's a big influence on Daniel Victor, but I know he's a Pink Floyd fan. I'm like almost certain of that. So anyway, number 24, Never Ending White Lights, the Canadian band project. Number 23, and a couple of these bands I'm not like super into. I just kind of thought, well, Pink Floyd's pretty big in the influence, so I put them higher than others. Like the Mars Volta, I'm a bigger fan of some of these bands. Elden, of course, total psychedelic. You know, the psychedelic element. It's indie-tronica, but it's very neo-psych. You know, I don't have. I'll just say there's one band on here that I would think of neo-psych for. I didn't include in here. I probably should have, but sometimes when the influence is like 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th on the totem pole, I don't think to include them. But they've even covered The Dark Side of the Moon. They do like an annual cover show, the members of Elden. And Elden from Denver, Colorado. From Colorado. And this album, Misinformation Age, is their masterpiece from 2018. But yeah, it's space rock. It's electronic. It's very kind of trippy and melodic at points, very danceable at times. But you know, they show their kind of psychedelic and Pink Floyd influence, especially, and the fact that they covered The Dark Side of the Moon is you know, the members have done that, kind of supports that even more. Number 23. Number 22, I'm going with the Alan Parsons Project. I like the Alan Parsons Project more than Alan Parsons, I guess, but obviously the one big connection Alan Parsons has is he was the engineer, I believe, in the studio when they recorded The Dark Side of the Moon. He's worked with Steven Wilson, and just in terms of texture and style, I mean, this album, this is what, the Tales of Mystery and Imagination. There's a few songs, not so much on this album, I guess, but that song Time sounds like a Pink Floyd song, totally. And even Eye in the Sky, it's very kind of dreamy, trippy Floyd. And, you know, it's obvious. Obviously, he knew them, he worked with them. I think he might have worked with them on Wish You Were Here as well. So anyway, massive, sort of indirect or direct influence, and so that it comes out in a lot of his music. Not all of it. Some of it sounds like yacht rock, of course, but anyway. The Alan Parsons Project, number 22. Number 21, well, this is not their... Pink Floyd is definitely not their primary influence, and it's only on maybe some, the more recent records that I know, because my knowledge of their catalog isn't that high, but I'm going with The Gathering. This is Mandy Lion, their like 3rd album, and I wouldn't say it has as much on this, somewhat, but I think on not the last one, the one before it, that I really kind of, I got a little bit more into them. I forget the name of the record. It was from 2012. They had 2 or 3 like sort of mid-level epics that were just like, I'm like, this is Pink Floyd. This is definitely space rock, psychedelic space rock for a band that's influenced by, you know, obviously new wave of British heavy metal and even some death metal, but you know, and gothic metal, of course. They think of The Gathering, the band from Holland. They have a Pink Floyd, and the musicians, especially the songwriting. You know, I don't know if Annika herself, the singer who was on this record, Mandy Lion, and many of the other records until it was about a decade ago, like 15 years ago. I don't remember when she left The Gathering. But anyway, The Gathering, number 21, one of the several metal bands, not necessarily on this list, but that were influenced by Pink Floyd. Number 20, well, not their primary style, but like a close secondary style, gospel. Now, they only have the 2 records, of course, but their style of sort of spaz or, screamo is combined with this trippy, psychedelic, keyboard-driven, kind of trippy space rock. So the Pink Floyd element is definitely there. I know the members are influenced, like the drummer's influenced by Genesis, so I just think, well, this is almost like post-hardcore punk meets Floyd, really, in a lot of ways, gospel. And this is their album, The Loser, from 2022, which is my album of the year that year. But anyway, gospel, number 20. They're a lot like the Mars Volta. So they have like a math rock. And I guess why would you have them on here, not the Mars Volta? That's a good question. I think that it's more blatant. With the Mars Volta, there's other influences still, but I don't know. Mars Volta probably should have been on this list. Maybe I'll do it again in a few years and bump them up. Number 20. Number 19, Warpaint. And this is and I think some of their style isn't as Floydy as like this EP and the first album. This EP of the, what's it called again? Exquisite Corpse. Exquisite Corpse EP. For all-female band now. They originally had a male drummer at one point, but it's very dreamy, trippy music, especially the early stuff. I mean, it's post-rock, it's dream pop, it's what's the other way to describe it? It's psychedelic pop, and kind of almost music that puts you in a trance. It's very mesmerizing, but that's what a lot of Pink Floyd does too. And so I don't know if the members of they have an album called, they have a song on this called Crimson, so maybe they're King Crimson fans. I don't know how much, I know they had connected with the Mars Volta, but I don't know how much the members of Warpaint were fans of Pink Floyd, but I think of their style, I think one of the biggest parts of it is the psychedelic part, and I think, they have like a Pink Floyd thing. The guitar textures remind me of Pink Floyd, they're kind of spacey. So, Warpaint, a band I love, number 19. Number 18, well, the whole post-rock genre and the tremolo picking and stuff like that kind of owes a lot to Floyd. Some other artists like Tangerine Dream, but a lot of soundtrack music. But I'm going with Godspeed You Black Emperor. I think they're not the definitive, they're one of the definitive, if not the definitive post-rock band. I think the way that they kind of have, the way they use samples and the way they kind of build, some of the Pink Floyd stuff, of course, even the stuff, the pre-Dark Side stuff, I think post-rock and Godspeed specifically took a nod to, they were influenced by a lot of other stuff too, but post-rock as a genre owes a lot to Pink Floyd and David Gilmour specifically on the style of guitar and sort of the slow building climaxes, The Mars Volta, you could say the same thing at their best, but anyway, number 18. Number 17, going with Midlake. Now, I think of them like Fleetwood Mac or something, but they're kind of sort of psychedelic folk stuff. You listen to like Obscured by Clouds or stuff off More, or let's say the pre-Dark Side stuff. Really, even like Wish You Were Here, the title track, some of the more acoustic-driven pieces that Floyd did, some Off the Wall. Midlake, I think, has taken a far amount of influence from. You could say they're influenced by like Fairport Convention or more classic rock besides psychedelic rock, more like tradition. I don't know. The Eagles maybe a little bit because I think they're from Texas. But anyway, I know that a lot of people have compared some of their music to Floyd. This is their album, The Trials of Von Acupantha, their second record from 2006. Probably the most well-known. It has the song Roscoe, of course, which the first track, it's always to me sounded like a Fleetwood Mac song. But yeah, there's definitely a psychedelic and a Pink Floyd influence, it sounds like. Again, how this ended up getting ranked, probably because I like them a little more than some of these. I don't know. Sometimes Pub Meeple isn't perfect, and I always try to manipulate the results, but I hate to think too much when I do these things. So number 17. Number 16, U2. While they're both known as like a pop band and a post-punk band that sort of were big influence on like 80s pop, alternative rock, and even like new wave, you can't deny that The Edge, with his inventive guitar style, probably was taking a little bit of influence from David Gilmour. They definitely experimented with guitar textures, and that alone, I think they borrowed from Floyd. Even in Ireland, they probably grew up listening to a lot of Floyd, so especially The Edge. So it's not as big as some bands, but I think people discount the influence that Pink Floyd had on them. Not on the sort of big conceptual, because they don't really have any concept albums exactly, but I'm talking about just texturally, tonally, sort of combining some similar influences, and they drew what Pink Floyd did. So anyway, that's Unforgettable Fire. Well, give or take my favorite record from U2. So number 16. Number 15, okay, so I don't have anything yet, but I'm going with SJS because there's a very strong influence on that album I've heard. And again, the other records, the jury's still out, but I'm probably going to like those. But I hear a lot of Floyd. I hear a lot of other stuff, the jazzy element, space rock, but Floyd were space rock. So SJS, as weird as it is that I'm very new to them, I've only been listening to them a few weeks, I'm going with them at number 15. Number 14. So I end up splitting this up. I should have split up one or two others probably, but going with Steven Wilson, even though his solo career, I think, has been more slanted on like retro pop and I don't know. It's been kind of less apparent than on Porcupine Tree stuff, but you could say Blackfield. But this album, I mean, I don't know if this album, the album from last year, Harmony Codex, I think has a little more than, say, something like the Raven sounds like it's pure prog, whereas this album is drawing a lot of, you know, like ambient influences and melodic influences that, I don't know, there's no denying Pink Floyd's a big influence on both Porcupine Tree and him, so he had to go on the list. So he's at number 14. Number 13, well, I mentioned one other band who really was influenced as a metal band. Well, I'm going with Queensryche. You call them metal. They are, at least some of the music is heavy enough to be considered metal, of course. And this album, of course, Empire from 1990, has the song Silent Lucidity, which sounds totally like an homage or a tribute at points to Floyd. Very kind of melancholy, spacey, dreamy. You know, like a lot of Operation Mindcrime was, I guess, influenced by The Wall. There's a big influence that Pink Floyd on, especially on the early Queensryche, this stuff in the first, 15 years of their career. The stuff I actually like. So, I mean, they were influenced by a lot of other stuff, but Pink Floyd is definitely in there, no question. And the guitar textures from Chris DeGarmo and Michael Wilton, and Jeff Tate's vocals especially. Kind of the trippiness to some of them. That's where he, at points, different. And he got a little older, got a little deeper. It sounded less kind of falsetto, like trying to sound like, you know, like Rob Halford or even Bruce Dickinson at points. So number 13. Number 12, well, much like Midlake or Kunik, House of Fools. Now, House of Fools are a band that most people don't know. They remind me of a few different bands, but there was always a Pink Floyd element in some of their songs. The way the guitar textures, the way they go acoustic, and kind of the songs build. Very singer-songwriter points, so you think of like Wish You Were Here, some of the stuff from the Sid era. I mean, it's not as trippy as some stuff on this list, but I mean, it was like the one thing, I don't even know if they mentioned the Flaming Lips here, of course, and definitely influenced by Pink Floyd. So it's like second degree of separation, but yeah, I've always, I mean, I hear Queen and some other bands in their sound, House of Fools, but you know, Pink Floyd is definitely in there. And House of Fools, I did a video on a couple years ago. I love this band. Unfortunately, they're not anymore, really. They're going to do a comeback album. It didn't happen a few years ago. But House of Fools from North Carolina. Yeah, I don't have Between the Buried and Me, by the way. I mean, I like them, but I've said my piece about them. Number 12. Number 11, because I think the Between the Buried and Me guys are fans of House of Fools, actually, and vice versa. Local bands, of course, doing a progressive kind of stuff. Number 11, Giant Sky. You know, of course, if I'm going to have SJS on here, I have to have Giant Sky. This is like, this album, the debut album from 2021 it was, I believe. Super spacey. I mean, I don't have Soup on here, but this stuff is like the guitar textures, the organic kind of going on a trip, you know. Right out of the David Gilmour and Roger Waters and Richard Wright school of kind of Dark Side of the Moon, metal kind of stuff. I cannot get enough of this record. I listened to it the other day after being reminded how much I loved this kind of music when getting into SJS. And Giant Sky, this album is just fantastic. So they're number 11. Okay, I don't want to be doing anything with that. Now we're in the top 10. Yep. So, Shadow Gallery. Now, I could have pulled the self-title, which is my favorite, but I pulled this one, Room 5. They're album from 2005. Many people consider their favorite. And this, of course, the bonus disc, if you look here, hold it there, at the very bottom, has the 25-minute tour de force, greatest tribute ever of any band ever, in my mind, Floydian Memories medley. It probably references at least 28 or maybe 35 Pink Floyd tracks from all the eras. And while Shadow Gallery's sound is progressive metal, and they draw largely from like Rush, Queensryche, and Queen, maybe the biggest three influences. The biggest notable, like, documented influence, I saw a chat with members of Shadow Gallery back in the old Deja New days. It was a live chat they did. It was like 2001. And they were just talking about how, yeah, this Floyd, that Floyd, this Floyd. They were just talking about their worship of Pink Floyd. Floyd is their favorite band. I mean, they're influenced by Yes and Genesis and all the other prog. But Floyd actually, if you ask the members of Shadow Gallery, is their biggest influence. And I can hear it definitely at times in a lot of their music. It's a secondary influence at times, but it's probably good in some ways. But you just listen to Floydian Memories. oh my god, it's like, yeah, you can hear these guys loved Floyd. So Shadow Gallery, number 10. Another progressive metal band, which their influence, again, is more subtle, but I'm going with Pain of Salvation. I saw documented on the old official website back in like 2002, concert reviews from Roger Waters doing The Wall, I think it was, from at least 3 of the members. And, you know, they were largely influenced by a few different bands. One of them was Faith No More. I'm thinking about Daniel Gilmour especially. One of them was Queensryche. You know, Queensryche, so it's like Second Degree or whatever. But, I mean, you know, they have their sort of trippy moments at points. They're more focused on texture, not texture, but like insane kind of vocal acrobatics and range and just kind of very schizophrenic styles being kind of weaved together in song. But to me, that they influence like prog with songwriting. That the songwriting's always been there with Pain of Salvation, and I think that's partly where it comes from. Beyond even, you could say they're second, like, yeah. I mean, they were fans. I know Daniel Gilmour had a Marillion phase, so you could like Second Degree. So Marillion and Queensryche, well, you're probably going to have some element of Pink Floyd if you're influenced by those two bands. So. And the Beatles, of course, but you know, I think Daniel Gilmour noted how he loved Simon & Garfunkel and the Beatles, but no, there's no question they're influenced by them. I mean, should they be this high on the list? Maybe not, given the amount of influence, but again, it was kind of I was weaving that balance of how much I liked them versus how much the Pink Floyd influence has showed up in their music. So, but they're number 9. Number 8. I really have to just say, basically from this record on, their last, would it be 4 proper full lengths? Anathema. I mean, the pre, We're Here Because You're Here, and that's this album right here from 2010. I even have one of the records on vinyl. I don't know that well. I know it varied, and a lot of it was in sort of black metal and gothic metal. But to me, they basically took the mantle from Porcupine Tree, and Porcupine Tree basically went on their hiatus at that point and started doing that kind of similar modern Pink Floyd-esque music at points. Melancholy, sort of textured, very emotional, very kind of dynamic music, where they're playing a lot of the same kind of whatever, the chord progressions are very, like, they're creating mood as opposed to technique, I guess. And this is my favorite of theirs, but I mean, again, it's kind of the 4 records they released basically from this point, from the 2010s on. They the 2010s Anathema. So it's enough to kind of have them on this list, and I really love that period of Anathema. Someday I might invest the time and start to like know their other stuff more, and then you could say, well, why aren't the Mars Volta? Because a lot of stuff Mars Volta, I don't hear the Pink Floyd, but you know, there's still a little bit in there. But I don't know, the Mars Volta, just my overall take on them isn't as high. Although it's kind of hypocritical, because it's like they're a love-hate band. I love a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff I'm not as crazy about from the Mars Volta. But let's see, number 8. Number 7, Archive. And this album, We're Here. That's the last album, the Anathema. You all look the same to me. Has one track especially. The first track, actually. It's a 15. I think it's the first. Is it the first track? Yes. Again, it is the most Pink Floyd Animals-like song that was never written and recorded by Pink Floyd during the Animals period. It is totally out of Animals. But our Archive in general, I'd say, yeah, the Pink Floyd has a very big influence. They're influenced by trip-hop. They're influenced by, yeah, I mean, you could say like Massive Attack, and I know they're British, so I mean, they might have been Marillion fans or fans of space rock or Hawkwind, stuff like that. But there's no doubt. I mean, just listen to this album. You all look the same to me as the 2002, and listen to it again. It's like, obviously, they're big Pink Floyd fans. And Archive, unlike like Anathema or like Mars Volta, even their worst records I still like more. They have a lot of records, though. They have like, I mean to do a video on them. They have like a dozen records. And some of them are pretty long. Their last one, Call to Arms and Angels, was like 68 minutes. So, but anyway, you all look the same to me from Archive. Archive, number 7 of Pink Floyd influenced bands and artists. So number 6, going with Apes Android / Carl Florence Power / Brian Jacobs too. This album, while it carries a lot of influences that are great in a lot of ways, from Bowie to Prince to Queen, especially Queen, 70s Queen, to Michael Jackson, to Metallica even, or Guns N' Roses, to just, you know, like post-punk stuff. there's no question. This album has a lot of trippy, psychedelic, sort of space rock elements. It's very... the way they use fat synthesizers and create an atmosphere, the way they use samples. There's a ton of Pink Floyd influence on Blood Moon, this album from Apes Android from 2008, and from the Colorful Influence Powell stuff. Maybe not quite as much, but I think the EP, The Strange Situation, has a couple songs I totally think of it. Just they're trippy. There's trippy moments. Very kind of hypnotic at points. And anyway, the vocal harmonies, they're more like Queen, but, you know, the Pink Floyd had harmonies too, of course, vocal harmonies. But yeah, Apes and Android / Colorful Influence Powell, number 6, who I love, of course. I have my massive bias. Number 5, Ocean Size. Now, this is maybe the most Pink Floyd Ocean Size album that I think of, because the guitar textures on this sound like they're taken right off of, like, something from, I don't know, from Metal or from Animals or something at points, or just, you know, just, they're so trippy, those textures. I love all the Ocean Size albums. The last one I'm not quite as into, but I love most of them. But this one, the debut album, Effloresce, I think of, there's several tracks where they do these kind of totally hypnotic space rock guitar textures. I'm thinking of songs like One Day This All Could Be Yours. Even the vocal style, he sounds very much like something off of like Echoes or something. He was channeling that kind of the clean vocals, Mike Vennard. Was it Massive Bereavement, Women Who Love Men Who Love Drugs, and Saturday Morning Breakfast? They all have like these guitar textures. Just, you're basically brought back to the 1970s, like the early 70s Floyd. So anyway, that's number 5. Number 4, Pure Reason Revolution, of course. You know, the Dark Third, their debut album, which was, you know, huge, you know, great, fantastic debut record from 2006. There's some serious Pink Floyd elements. Even the song Bright Ambassadors of Morning, of course, that's a lyric from Echoes, from off the Metal record. You know, they're not denying the influence. They were definitely fans of Pink Floyd, John Courtney, and Chloe Alpern, you know, the other members. The guitar textures, the kind of astral folk, space rock guitar element of so many songs on this. Even like, what is it? The color, not the exact color, which, see, there's 3 versions. When I get into the CDs, I'll talk about those, of the Dark Third, of course. This one's on the side D bonus track, but the original version that came out in 2006 from the UK had that as a standard track. That with the piano is hypnotic, like something off of Atom Heart Mother or something, but yeah, there's like even Aeropause. Aeropause sounds like it came from Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, there's no denying that. So, number 4. Number 3, well, who else is it going to be but Porcupine Tree? Now, the album, Lightbulb Sun, is my favorite. I think of a song like Last Chance to Evacuate Planet Earth before it's a cycle, of course. That use of samples from that, what is it, Branch Davidian cult. I mean, Porcupine Tree, especially the early space rock kind of stuff, super big Pink Floyd. And Steven Wilson wouldn't deny that in his favorite, not his favorite album, but his favorite band of all time. I think he's noted that on the Album Years podcast is Pink Floyd. And although he says he never wants to listen to Dark Side of the Moon again because he's heard it too many times. But yeah, I mean, just look at their catalog, especially the first, you know, the 90s albums especially. Moments in the 2000s also, I'd say, but mostly, especially the 90s albums. Massive Pink Floyd. And I love those albums. I love the 2000s Porcupine Tree also. Stand for like one record more, for the most part, but anyway. Number 3, you know, and Porcupine Tree influence, especially Ocean Size and Pure Reason Revolution. They frequently have compared them to them. So, number 2, oops, I don't want to do anything of damage. Dredge, absolute huge influence from Pink Floyd. The bass player Drew, he's talked about loving it, like all the Pink Floyd albums, and they've written concept albums. That was partly why they did. Even just like their use of sort of psychedelic drugs at points with some of their music. The stuff, this is El Cielo, this uses some of that, but actually there's a demo called the Coquette demo, I think it is. There's stuff that's even more trippy than the stuff that's on here. I mean, they're to me, they've always been they've been a lot, because they're very melodic and poppy at times. Kind of like U2 meets Tool in some ways. Although, I think I felt like that a long time ago. I don't feel as strongly about that, but, I mean, but all their records, I mean, even it's made me more apparent at points. Mark Engel's guitar tone, well, you could say the same thing about The Edge, definitely takes something from Gilmour. But yeah, I mean, they have a lot of they have a lot of other influences. Zeppelin, of course. You know, 90s stuff, 90s alternative rock and grunge, because they have a little bit of that. But you know, and they share, like, they have similarities to some bands. The combination of being conceptual, epic, very artsy, and trying to kind of make music beyond just a pop, you know, love story, kind of love, boy meets girl kind of music, but not going too far off the deep end about technique. I mean, they do have chops. Dino's a great drummer, and he plays piano at the same time, actually. But, you know, Pink Floyd, to me, was progressive rock, but not of the technical side. And that's, Dredge is very much in a similar fashion. To me, that's actually my favorite kind of progressive rock. I like technique, but, you know, I appreciate the melodies and the sort of full composition even more. So who's number one? Well, again, I don't know if I always think of them with Pink Floyd, but over the time when you always see the Genesis comparisons, Marillion's Pink Floyd influence can't be denied. I think that they're more influenced by Pink Floyd than they are by Genesis. Actually, I'd say yes, because Mark Kelly is a massive Yes fan, or like the Beatles. But I hear so much in the guitar texture, the tone of Steve Rothery. This album, Marbles especially, it's that wall of sound. A song like Ocean Cloud could have been done by like a modern version of Pink Floyd. They take a lot of the sort of approach to layers and texture and atmosphere and telling a story and the melancholy element that Pink Floyd did. I mean, Marillion have other elements to the sound. I am super biased because they are my favorite band. Been a fan for 29 years. But, yeah, I have to go with them. I mean, again, they came out number one because who am I going to vote against them? Kevin Gilbert. It's hard to say. Even though I'd say Porcupine Tree probably have a bigger Pink Floyd influence, it's pretty damn close. It's hard to, you know, I mean, there's so much Floyd in their sound at points. I mean, they have their own sound at the same time. I won't deny that. It's not a complete... This isn't... RPWL to me, because they used to be a Pink Floyd tribute band, pretty much is basically writing Pink Floyd, like, tribute music. Really have their own sound, but I think for me, for my taste, my favorite Pink Floyd influenced band, although I don't know if Marillion's ever even done any Pink Floyd covers. I'd be curious to find that out. But, yeah, especially just with Rothery and some of Mark Kelly's guitar or keyboard textures, some of the stuff, the synthesizers and the samples he's used, even using samples. They you know, stuff off like Anarachnophobia or like Radiation. Radiation, totally. I mean, it's like you want to say the Radiohead influence. Well, you know, Radiohead basically was borrowing from Pink Floyd too. So that's my top 25 and change Pink Floyd influenced bands. Who are your favorite bands that Pink Floyd, or an artist that Pink Floyd influenced? You know, of course I didn't include those likes of like Radiohead and the Flaming Lips because I'm not a fan of those. But thank you for watching. I am gonna try doing some more stuff over the next few days. Want to get back to the Albums of the Year series, but I want to actually work on this. And then I didn't do a calendar update. I got the anniversaries for September coming up next week. But thank you for watching again, and we'll see you next time.